Well, I've been asked to share just a little bit about my experience transitioning to phenomenon-based instruction in my classroom. It, in my 20 years of teaching, has had more significant impact on student learning than anything else I've done. With the release of NGSS, my team of teachers and I quickly realized that what NGSS was asking us to do was very different than what we had been doing. It was asking us to not only change what we were teaching, but to change how we were teaching. So we realized that we were going to have to look for some curriculum to help guide us. When we implemented it, it transformed my classroom and student learning. It basically flipped what I had been doing right on its head. For example, instead of teaching Newton's laws of motion, like I traditionally would, where I would introduce them to Isaac Newton, the three laws, the kids would memorize it, then they'd do some experiments to prove that Newton was correct and the textbook was correct and I was correct. Instead of doing that, students are investigating why their phone breaks when they drop it sometimes and not others. And they're basically putting together Newton's laws of motion on their own through their investigation and trying to make sense of the phone breaking, rather than me or the textbook just telling them about some thing that was already discovered by someone else. The students themselves are the scientists discovering it. And that's the most powerful thing is that it puts students as the scientists in the classroom and the experts in the classroom instead of me or a textbook. They're the ones that are trying to make sense of phenomenon. It puts me in the role of a guide. I'm basically just guiding students and helping them make sense of things. I'm not the expert anymore, trying to find creative ways for them to understand things or memorize things. In fact, one student a couple of years ago asked me, do you really not know any of this stuff? Because I would constantly be saying, I don't know, what do you think? What do other people think? So it's drastically shifted my role in the classroom and students' role as well. And there's certainly been some challenges. Questioning students about things and like getting them to think more critically about their ideas. It's an art, and has taken time for me to build that and for students to get used to it. It certainly takes us longer to get through units because it takes more time for students to make observations, investigate things, question things, formulate their ideas, and then revise their ideas based on new findings. So it just takes us longer to get through units. Lessons can be less predictable than what they otherwise would have been because it's students' ideas that are driving and student questions that are driving the unit forward. And although you can somewhat predict what student ideas and misconceptions are going to be, sometimes unexpected things arise. So I've had to be patient with myself, and I've encouraged other teachers going through this to be patient with themselves and their students as they adjust to this new approach to instruction and learning. But it certainly has its rewards. I've seen students more willing to take risks because it's not a classroom of right and wrong anymore. It's a community where we're just trying to figure things out on our own. So students are more willing to share ideas. They're more willing to ask questions. I've seen students more engaged because it's easier for them to apply what we're studying to their real life as they try to make sense of things. So I've seen students more engaged as well. This significant difference really hit home with me with one particular student that I had. I had this student in 2 consecutive years in 8th grade and 9th grade. And he checked all the boxes as someone who might have a hard time finding success in school. When I had him in 8th grade, he was generally disengaged in class. His work completion was poor. His grades were low. But much of his 8th grade work revolved around textbook readings and notes and worksheets. We did experiments, but they were largely used just to prove that the ideas presented to him either by me or the textbook were correct. During his 9th grade year, I saw a dramatic change in him because I shifted to a phenomenon-based approach. The same student was then given the opportunity to figure things out on their own. And he became the expert scientist in the classroom rather than me or the textbook. And as a result, this same student became a leader in his 9th grade class. He was engaged in class, he was eager to share his ideas, and the questions that he had, his work completion dramatically improved, his grades dramatically improved. He was a street smart kid. He was a problem solver. And phenomenon-based instruction allowed him to access the science concepts in a way that traditional instruction did not. I think other teachers willing to make this shift to phenomenon-based instruction would see and have similar experiences. A fellow teacher of mine, a few years after our shift to this phenomenon-based approach, expressed to me, they said, I couldn't go back to how I was teaching before, just because they recognized the significant impact it was having on student learning.